right, here's our first video in 11.7. We're going to talk first about events involving the word and. Now, you remember we talked about events that involve the word or, and remember that or really means that you're going to add the probabilities together. Well, in this case, when we talk about the word and means that we're going to multiply the two probabilities together. So if we have two events that are independent events, meaning that they occur that the occurrence of either of them has no effect on the probability of the other. It means they can't happen at the same time, or it means that whatever happened first doesn't matter, it doesn't affect the probability of what happens second. If those two events are independent events and we're trying to find the probability of event A and event B happening, then we would multiply the two probabilities together. Let me show you a few examples. In example number 1, it says a US roulette wheel has 38 numbered slots, 1 through 36, 0, and 00. 18 are black, 18 are red, and 2 are green. And there's a picture to kind of show you what it looks like. The ball can land on any slot with equal probability. What is the probability, remember that's what you want, out of total, so a fraction that can be turned into a decimal or a percent. What's the probability of red occurring on 2 consecutive plays? Consecutive means plays back to back. Now, you have to kind of interpret this one a little bit. What this is saying is what is the probability that when you roll the first time you'll get a red, and then when you roll the second time you'll also get a red. Now when I roll the first time, I can land on whatever number and whatever color. When I go to roll the second time, it really doesn't matter what I rolled the first time. It won't affect what happens the second time. And so these are two independent events. And so when I have two independent events and I'm looking at the probability of rolling a red and then another red, did you hear the key word there? And that means I'm really going to multiply. I've got to find the probability that I roll a red, and then I've got to find the probability of me rolling another red. And because I use the word and, that means I'm going to multiply the two probabilities together. So what is the probability that when I roll, I'll land on a red? Well, how many red spots are there? Out of how many total? You should end up with 18 out of 38. When I go to roll the second time, there are still 18 red spots out of a total of 38. Nothing has changed. And so the probability of me rolling a red and then another red, a red 2 consecutive plays, is 18 over 38 times 18 over 38, or 81 out of 361 if you reduce your fraction. Or if they wanted to decimal, you can say 0.22 or a 22% chance that I'm going to land on the color red. Or look at example 2. Example number 2 says, if 2 or more events are independent, we can find the probability of them all occurring by multiplying their probabilities, right? Like we just said. The probability of a baby girl is 1/2, right? What's the probability that you're going to have a girl? That's 1 out of 2. So the probability of 9 girls in a row is, let's see, let's say I have a girl and then another girl and then another girl and then another girl and then another girl 9 different times, right? And so I've got to find the probability of having a girl times the probability of having a girl, and I need to do that 9 different times. Well, the probability of me having a girl the first time is 1 out of 2. The probability of me having a girl the second time, because it's independent, doesn't matter what type of kid I had. Type of kid? I don't know if that sounds right. If I had a boy or a girl the first time. But it doesn't matter what I had the first time of what I'm going to have the second time. So 1 out of 2. What's the probability I have a girl the third time? 1 out of 2. And I've got to do that 9 different times. Or could I say 1/2 to the 9th power? The probability of you having 9 girls in a row are 1 out of 512. Not very big probability. And you would have a headache. That would be a lot of work. But you can find the probability of something happening multiple times in a row by either raising it to the 9th power or multiplying the 1/2 9 different times. All right, let's look at this next idea where it says that you can find the probability of an event happening at least once. If you can figure out the probability of the event not happening and subtracting it from the whole. Because if it doesn't happen, is one thing, but then the opposite of not happening is at least happening once, right? So you can find the probability of something at least happening once if you take the amount of times it doesn't happen and subtract it from the whole. Here's example number 3 to kind of give you an idea. If the probability that South Florida will be hit by a hurricane in any single year is 5 out of 19, what is the probability that South Florida will be hit by a hurricane in 3 consecutive years? Hit by a hurricane in year 1, and then hit again in year 2, and then hit again in year 3. Now remember, they're independent events. It doesn't matter if it was hit by a hurricane on year 1. That doesn't affect it being hit by a hurricane again. And if it's hit by a hurricane in year 1 and in year 2 and in year 3, do you hear the key word there? It means I'm going to multiply the probabilities together. So the probability that Southern Florida is hit in year 1 is 5 out of 9. In year 2 is 5 out of 9. In year 3 is 5 out of 9. Hit year 1 and year 2 and year 3. I'm going to multiply the probabilities together. And I could say that there's a 0.02 chance that it will be hit by a hurricane in 3 consecutive years. A 2% chance that it's going to get hit by a hurricane in 3 years in a row. Now, part B says, what is the probability that South Florida will not be hit by a hurricane in the next 10 years? So you decide to move to Florida because there's only a 2% chance that you're going to get hit by a hurricane 3 years in a row. Really though, what's the probability that you're not going to get hit by a hurricane if you live there for the next 10 years? So the key word there is not. I want to figure out what's the probability of us not getting hit by a hurricane. Well, what's the probability of us getting hit by a hurricane? 5 out of 19, right? And so I should be able to figure out the probability of us not getting hit by taking the whole and subtracting 5 out of 19 from it, leaving me with 14 over 19, right? 19 minus 5, 14 out of 19. So the probability of us not getting hit by a hurricane each year is 14 out of 19. But I want to know what's the probability of me not getting hit by a hurricane year 1 and year 2 and year 3 for 10 years. That means I want to take that 14 out of 19 and I want to multiply it 10 times in a row or raise it to the 10th power. So really the probability of us not getting hit by a hurricane in the next 10 years is 0.05 or 5% chance. There's only a 5% chance that if you move down to Florida that you're not going to get hit by a hurricane if you stay there for 10 years. Ooh, that doesn't sound very good, right? So the probability of us getting hit by a hurricane at least once in the next 10 years. Well, if the probability of us not getting hit by a hurricane is 5%, then what's the probability of us getting hit by a hurricane at least once? Well, that means we can take all the times that we don't get hit, subtract it from the whole, 1, and I end up getting 0.95 or 95%. So I can find the probability of it happening at least once by finding the probability of it not happening and subtracting it from 1, the whole. So there's a 95% chance probability that you're going to get hit by a hurricane at least once if you move down to Florida and stay there for the next 10 years. Woo! That's why I'm in Phoenix. All right, make sure you practice those probabilities with the word and in your independent events, and then practice a few examples here with the probability of happening at least once. Practice those few before we move on to the next video. Let me know if you have any questions.